What if I told you that the most powerful empire on earth once cried out in despair? That Rome, mistress of kings and nations, was humiliated not by another empire, but by tribes who lived in dark forests, led by a man who knew every Roman weakness. Here's today's promise. You will discover how 3 entire legions were destroyed in just a few days, and why this event forever changed the limits of Rome's expansion. In the year 9 AD, Rome believed itself invincible. Its legionary eagles advanced to the edges of Europe, imposing order and building endless roads. But in a rainy, treacherous forest called Teutoburg, the unimaginable happened. It wasn't Hannibal, it wasn't Parthia, it wasn't Carthage. The blow came from within, from Arminius, a man whom Rome had trained, armed, and decorated. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you can follow this entire story until the end. And believe me, each detail is more astonishing than the last. The tragedy began almost trivially, as a routine march. Publius Quinctilius Varus, governor of Germania, led 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, toward a territory supposedly facing a tribal rebellion. The information about this rebellion came from Arminius, a Cheruscan noble who served as a Roman auxiliary officer. Arminius was seen as loyal. He spoke Latin, dressed like a Roman, held citizenship, and enjoyed the respect of senators and generals. But behind that image of fidelity, there was a plan crafted with patience and cold precision. For years, he gained Rome's trust, while secretly uniting Germanic tribes long divided and at constant war. He knew, if Rome consolidated its occupation, there would be no room left for his culture or freedom. His strategy, therefore, was not to confront the legions head-on, but to strike them where they were most vulnerable, in the terrain, in logistics, in psychological attrition. And have you noticed how often the greatest danger does not come from outside, but from within what we most trust? When Varus decided to trust Arminius's word, he unknowingly signed the death sentence of thousands of men. The legions marched into the heart of the Teutoburg forest. Rain poured without end. The soil turned into deep mud, horses sank, wagons bogged down. The trees' trunks blocked any organized military formation. What was once a mighty war machine became a long, disordered column, slow and vulnerable. Shields clattered against each. Other exhausted soldiers tried to press forward, but each step was a burden. It was the perfect setting for an ambush. Then Arminius revealed his true side. Hidden among trees and bushes, Germanic warriors began attacking the Roman flanks. They hurled short spears, arrows, and war cries that echoed through the dense woods. Roman artillery was useless here. The cohorts could not regroup. It was as if the forest itself had turned into an enemy, suffocating every advance. And with each passing hour, the trap tightened. Can you imagine the terror of soldiers who believed they were invincible, suddenly caught like prey in an invisible snare? The attacks never ceased. For days, the Roman troops were surrounded, struck, and scattered without rest. Soaked to the bone, starving, exhausted, increasingly disorganized. The sounds of the forest, branches snapping, hidden footsteps, war cries, created an atmosphere of psychological torment. On the 4th day, despair took over. Publius Quinctilius Varus, realizing the situation was irreversible, chose suicide rather than capture. Many of his officers followed the same fate. Without leadership or morale, discipline collapsed. Whatever organization remained was consumed by panic. It was a massacre. According to Cassius Dio, about 20,000 soldiers were killed or enslaved. None of the legionary eagles survived. Those standards, symbols of the soul and pride of each legion, were seized by the Germans. For Rome, losing an eagle was an unbearable wound, more painful than losing battles. And so, in the darkness of the Teutoburg forest, the empire that called itself invincible discovered that even giants can bleed. Do you believe Rome could ever recover from such a humiliating defeat? When news of the catastrophe reached Rome, the impact was devastating. Emperor Augustus, according to Suetonius, cried out in despair, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." For months, he avoided any mention of Germania. Plunged into mourning and disbelief, the Senate and the Roman people panicked. If 3 legions could be annihilated by tribes considered barbaric, then Rome was no longer untouchable. Emergency measures were taken. Fortifications were hastily built along the Rhine. New legions were recruited, but despite reorganization, the psychological trauma was profound. For the first time in centuries, Rome accepted that it had boundaries. Expansion was not infinite. The empire that had pushed across continents now retreated before a forest. This strategic silence was unprecedented. Unlike the swift response after Cari against the Parthians, Augustus chose not to risk further immediate confrontations. It was as if even Rome's heart had hesitated, and here arises the question that still echoes: did Rome retreat out of prudence or out of fear? In the years following the tragedy, Rome remained silent on the Rhine frontier. Augustus, aged and shaken, avoided direct offensives. Instead, he reinforced defenses. Garrisons expanded, watchtowers erected, supply routes reorganized. The priority was no longer conquest, but safeguarding what remained. The atmosphere in Rome was somber. Tacitus describes an empire in mourning, gripped by fear and withdrawal. Suetonius records that public festivities were suspended, as if the entire city bore the mark of tragedy. The expansionist glow seemed to dim, and there were practical reasons for caution. Advancing deep into Germania required long, vulnerable supply lines, facing endless rain, treacherous rivers, and hostile terrain. With 3 legions lost, Rome knew another misstep could mean disaster. But Rome's story never ends in silence. Just 5 years later, a name emerged to reignite the flame of vengeance and restore honor: Germanicus. Germanicus, son of Drusus, grandson of Mark Antony, and nephew of the new emperor Tiberius, carried multiple legacies. Young, charismatic, disciplined, deeply loved by the troops, he became the face of Roman vengeance. His mission was clear: restore the legion's honor and avenge Teutoburg's tragedy. In 14 AD, Germanicus crossed the Rhine as supreme commander of the German front. He knew each step was loaded with symbolism. The lost eagles still represented open wounds, and Arminius, now hailed as a hero by the tribes, remained free. The campaigns that followed were intense. Germanicus altered routes, used river fleets to support infantry, adopted new tactics, and even secured alliances with tribes hostile to Arminius. This wasn't just war, it was adaptation. Rome was turning defeat into strategy. In 15 AD came the first great triumph. 2 of the 3 lost eagles were recovered. For Rome, it wasn't just a symbol, it was like reclaiming its very soul. But Germanicus wanted more than symbols. He wanted to face the man who had made Rome bleed. When Germanicus finally reached the Teutoburg battlefield, the scene was a nightmare, frozen in time. Bones scattered, rusted armor fragments, broken spears, rotting shields. No Roman had returned there since the massacre. The young general ordered absolute silence. The legions marched slowly among the remains, like a vast open-air cemetery. This was more than a campaign. It was a pilgrimage of honor. Germanicus commanded the bones of fallen soldiers to be collected, buried with dignity, and funerary sacrifices performed. Roman vengeance began with memory. Soon after, he clashed directly with Arminius in fierce battles. Ancient chronicles tell of fighting along the Weser River, where the Germanic leader was wounded but escaped. Even encircled, even with family captured, Arminius knew every tree, every hidden trail, vanishing like a shadow. Rome recovered symbols and inflicted defeats, but could not seize the man who personified its shame. And here lies the dilemma. How do you defeat an enemy who does not fight like you but like the land itself? By the end of 16 AD, after successive campaigns, Germanicus's legions were exhausted. Victories did not translate into real conquest. The terrain remained impenetrable, ambushes relentless, and permanent occupation of Germania seemed impossible. More than that, Germanicus' rising popularity began to stir Emperor Tiberius's suspicion. Rome, ever expansionist, now saw prudence as survival. Tiberius decided to halt the campaigns and recalled Germanicus. He was welcomed in Rome with honors, parading in triumph with Germanic prisoners, proud veterans, and the recovered eagles. The people hailed him as a hero, but deep down all knew the truth. Germania remained free, and Arminius was still alive. And that was the greatest paradox. Arminius, raised as a Roman, educated as a Roman, trained as a Roman, became the most lethal enemy Rome ever faced on that frontier. He was not just a barbarian. He was the distorted reflection of the empire itself. The question remained, had Rome finally met the limit of its expansion? Arminius was born among the Cherusci, but Rome made him a soldier. He was educated, fought alongside the legions, learned their tactics, their discipline, their military logic. Then he turned that knowledge against his masters, shaping an asymmetric war that dismantled the giant. He didn't need to defeat Rome in pitched battles, only deny it the terrain, cut its routes, destroy its confidence. That's what he did at Teutoburg, and in every clash thereafter. His greatest weapon was not the sword, but knowledge of the enemy. Arminius proved that even the Roman colossus could collapse when pulled out of its system. In the end, Rome gave up. After the disastrous Long Bridges crossing, the empire abandoned the idea of conquering eastern Germania. The Rhine became not a bridge of expansion, but a wall of containment. And for the first time, Rome acknowledged its limits. Arminius did not found an empire, but he gave the Germanic tribes something greater, the certainty that Rome could be stopped. He became a symbol of resistance, revered by allies and studied even by his enemies. And now I ask you, was Rome wise in recognizing its limits, or cowardly for not pressing on? If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share. Because the past is not just memory, it's a mirror of the present.